Hello, Sleepyheads, and welcome back to Yawn and Learn, the channel where your curiosity curls up under a warm blanket and history gently tucks you in. I'm your host, Conroy, your bedtime historian, storyteller, and ever-curious friend. Tonight we're diving into one of humanity's oldest obsessions, the end of the world. Have you ever noticed how obsessed humans are with endings? The end of the world, the end of civilization, even the end of the internet when the Wi-Fi goes out. We just can't help ourselves. We've imagined floods, fires, plagues, alien invasions, nuclear blasts, zombie apocalypses, you name it. We've ended it, over and over again. Every generation has believed this was the real one. This is it, the signs are here, the end is near, and then we keep paying taxes. But it's not really about destruction, is it? It's about meaning. Because if there's an ending, there must be a story. And if there's a story, maybe we're the main characters. The truth is, the end of the world has always been humanity's favorite bedtime story. From ancient priests reading omens in the stars to modern prophets on TikTok predicting doomsday next Tuesday, we keep finding new ways to say, this is the big one. Why? To truly understand our unstoppable fascination with apocalypse, we have to go back, long before mushroom clouds or asteroids, to the first human who looked up at a stormy sky and thought, someone up there must be really mad. Because the end of the world didn't begin in science fiction. It began with thunder. The first endings, floods, fire, and forgotten gods. Long before Hollywood perfected the art of the cinematic explosion, people were already imagining their own destruction. The oldest story we know is a story about catastrophe. Almost every ancient civilization had a great flood myth, a divine reset event, a cosmic control-alt-delete. The Sumerians had Ziusudra, the man who survived when the gods flooded the world for being too noisy. Apparently, humanity was so irritating that even the gods needed noise-canceling headsets. The Babylonians told the same story with Utnapishtim. The Hebrews retold it with Noah. Different boats, same lesson. Meanwhile, the Greeks had Deucalion and Pyrrha, who survived Zeus's divine temper tantrum and repopulated the world by throwing stones over their shoulders. Ancient fertility methods were creative. Across the world, the Aztecs, Mayans, and Hindus also imagined worlds ending in floods, fires, or cosmic chaos. And each time, they believed in renewal, in the dawn of a new age. As if early humanity looked around and collectively said, yeah, this place could use a reset. But these weren't just stories, they were emotional insurance policies. When rivers overflowed, volcanoes erupted, or crops failed, people needed to believe there was a reason, that chaos wasn't random, that someone, somewhere, was in control. Because randomness is terrifying. But divine punishment, that's predictable. You can reason with it, you can prepare for it. Sacrifice a goat, say a prayer, build a boat. Maybe you'll survive the sequel. And here's the most fascinating part. These myths appeared in places thousands of miles apart, among people who never met, as if humans everywhere shared the same deep instinct that the world wouldn't simply end. It would begin again. Not death, but rebirth. Not apocalypse, but renewal. Think about it. The first people to imagine the end of the world were also the first to imagine hope. Prophets, predictions, and public panic when the end went public. If flood myths were the beta version of the apocalypse, then religion was the full release, because at some point humanity stopped fearing the end and started planning for it. Take the Book of Revelation, for example, the Bible's most dramatic finale. Dragons, horsemen, and enough symbolism to make any literature student cry. It turned the end of the world into a grand spectacle. Fire, trumpets, angels, beasts. Basically an ancient cinematic universe. But instead of one sequel, it promised infinite endings. And everyone wanted a piece of it. In medieval Europe, especially around the year 1000, crowds gathered to await the end of the world because people were weirdly afraid of round numbers. When nothing happened, they tried again in 1666, the year of the Great Fire of London. Because, 3 sixes. Subtle. Even great thinkers got swept up in the countdown. Isaac Newton, somewhere between inventing physics and dodging apples, calculated that the world would end in 2060. If he's right, you might want to finish your bucket list soon. Then there was the 19th century American preacher William Miller, who convinced thousands that the world would end in 1844. People sold their homes, quit their jobs, and climbed hills to await Jesus. When the sun rose the next morning, it became known as the Great Disappointment, which, coincidentally, is also how most of us feel about Mondays. But here's the thing. Every failed prophecy didn't kill the idea of apocalypse. It fed it. Because every time the end didn't arrive, people didn't lose faith. They just tweaked the math. Okay, maybe next year. Maybe it's symbolic. Maybe it's the end of an era, not the world. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance reduction. In human terms, it's called not wanting to feel stupid. But beneath the persistence lies something deeper. Apocalypse gave people meaning. If the world was ending, then your suffering wasn't random. Your life had a cosmic storyline. That belief is both powerful and dangerous. Because once people start to think they're living in the final chapter, they'll do anything to make sure they're on the right side of history, even if it means rewriting history themselves. When the end became politics, power, fear, and the apocalypse, you know what's even better than predicting the end of the world? Profiting from it. Somewhere between ancient prophecy and medieval panic, humanity discovered something remarkable. Nothing controls a crowd quite like the fear of eternal fire. In medieval Europe, the apocalypse wasn't just theology, it was policy. The church preached that Judgment Day could come at any moment, and, conveniently, the only way to prepare was obedience. Every drought, plague, or eclipse became a divine warning. Every tax, crusade, or witch hunt became holy preparation. A brilliantly engineered form of spiritual FOMO was transformed into social order. And if you dared question it, congratulations, you were a heretic, and the fire was calling your name. For centuries, the fear of the end gave empires enormous power. Kings claimed divine right. God chose me to rule until he returns. Popes crowned emperors as defenders of the faith. Peasants worked harder. After all, the world was ending soon. Even art joined the effort. Church walls were covered with murals of demons devouring sinners like medieval snacks. You didn't need to be literate to get the message. This wasn't just religion. It was preprint propaganda. And of course, where there's fear, there's business. Pilgrims bought holy relics said to protect them from Judgment Day. Priests sold indulgences, basically get-out-of-hell-free cards. The apocalypse had become a brand. And Martin Luther's Reformation? In part, it was a protest against that very spiritual marketing. People were tired of paying premiums to avoid eternal flames. Apparently, even Holy Terror had a refund policy. The line between sin and apocalypse completely blurred. If crops failed, witches did it. If disease spread, blame the heretics. If a comet appeared, clearly the devil's fireworks. From Salem to Scotland, accusing someone of bringing about the end became the easiest way to explain what no one actually understood. And that fear? It justified torture, executions, and centuries of superstition. Apocalypse stopped being prophecy and became a tool. Eventually people noticed a pattern. Every time someone shouted, "Repent, the end is near," someone else was conveniently collecting donations. Then came the Enlightenment. Reason began to challenge divine panic. But the idea of the end didn't die. It simply changed uniforms. The robes gave way to lab coats. And that brings us to our next chapter, the science of the end, when we stopped blaming witches and started blaming physics. The science of the end. When does the world actually end? So far, we've explored mythical and cultural endings. But what about the real, physical end of the world? What does science have to say about that? Let's start small. On a personal scale, every life ends, civilizations end. But what about the planet itself? That's a trickier question. So let's take a little cosmic tour of the possibilities. Scenario 1. The Earth eats itself. Let's say we don't destroy it first. In a few 100 million years, Earth's core will cool, the magnetic field will weaken, and solar radiation will slowly erode our atmosphere. But long before that, plate tectonics could merge into a single massive supercontinent. Let's call it Pangea 2, the revenge of the continents. The interior of this megacontinent would become an endless desert. Coastlines would vanish. With the rain gone, life would retreat once more to the oceans, back to where it all began. Scenario 2. The sun loses its chill. Fast forward about 5 billion years. The sun, like every star, runs out of hydrogen. It starts fusing helium instead, swelling into a red giant and slowly devouring its children. Mercury, gone. Venus, vaporized. Earth, well, if we're lucky, we'll just get scorched. If not, we'll be swallowed whole. Call it cosmic karma. Scenario 3. The universe pulls a reverse card. Then there's the Big Crunch theory. The idea that one day the universe will stop expanding and collapse back in on itself. Every galaxy, every star, every particle rushing inward at unimaginable speed. Space and time folding back into a single point of infinite density. Basically, Control Z for existence. But don't celebrate just yet. Some scientists now think the universe isn't slowing down at all. It's speeding up. That leads us to an equally terrifying concept. The Big Rip. Space itself stretches so much that atoms can no longer hold together. First galaxies, then solar systems, then us. Scenario 4. The universe simply fades away. Prefer something quieter? Try the heat death scenario. The universe expands until stars burn out, black holes evaporate, and everything grows cold. No more light, no more energy, just endless darkness and silence. It's basically the ghosting version of the cosmos. Each of these endings is poetic in its own way. Fire, ice, collapse, decay. They're echoes of how ancient people imagined their own destruction, only now reinterpreted through astrophysics. And that's the fascinating part. Even with all our telescopes and equations, we're still telling the same story. We still imagine beginnings and endings because we need them. It turns out apocalypse isn't really about destruction. It's about meaning and the fear of losing it. Which brings us to our next question. Why do we crave the end of the world? And how does imagining the end make us feel safe? Why we love the end, the comfort of catastrophe. Here's a paradox for you. Humans fear the end of the world, and yet we can't stop thinking about it. From ancient prophecies to Hollywood blockbusters, from Nostradamus to Netflix, the apocalypse has become one of our favorite bedtime stories. But why? Why do we, a species that can't even handle bad Wi-Fi, keep imagining total annihilation? Let's unpack that. The psychology of catastrophe. Our brains are, at their core, survival machines. They evolved to scan for threats, lions, rival tribes, incoming storms. But in modern life, those threats are gone. Now we worry about deadlines and rent, so we invented bigger, scarier things to panic about. Nuclear war, killer robots, climate collapse, zombies. Apocalypse scenarios light up our ancient fear circuits. They give our anxiety better production value. And in a strange way, imagining the end makes us feel prepared. If you can visualize the worst possible outcome, your brain tricks itself into believing you're ready for it. It's like emotional insurance, except the policy never actually pays out. The media made it addictive. Since the 20th century, we've industrialized the apocalypse. Every decade had its own favorite flavor of doom. The 50s loved nuclear war. The 80s obsessed over rogue AI. The 2000s, zombies, obviously. The 2020s, climate anxiety and pandemics. Each wave reflects our deepest fears, and, maybe, our strangest hope, that the end of the world could also mean a new beginning. Movies like Mad Max, The Day After Tomorrow, or Don't Look Up aren't really about destruction. They're about redemption. The idea that something pure might rise from the ashes. We imagine endings because, secretly, we want a reset button. Endings give meaning. From a philosophical point of view, if something can end, it matters. Without endings, there are no stories. Without death, there is no life. The apocalypse gives everything before it a purpose. It's like the final chapter of a book. You dread it, but you also need it. Otherwise, you're just flipping through endless pages with no resolution. Even religions embrace this logic. Judgment Day, Ragnarok, Kali Yuga, each promises an ending that explains existence itself. Collective therapy. Apocalypse stories also bring people together. A shared fear creates a shared identity. When we watch disaster movies, we root for humanity together. We debate survival strategies, we tweet angrily about the fictional government's incompetence, and suddenly we're part of one giant global group chat. It's a kind of therapy, a way to process chaos and uncertainty as a collective. When the real world feels unpredictable, the end of the world feels oddly predictable. And that, somehow, is comforting. Maybe that's why we love apocalypse stories. They let us rehearse fear safely, imagine control in a world where we have none, and find meaning in the chaos. It's not that we want the world to end. We just want the story to mean something before it does. Next, let's look at how every predicted apocalypse so far has, well, failed spectacularly, and what that says about humanity's most stubborn trait, our unshakable hope. The end that never comes. Here's the funny thing about the end of the world. It never actually ends. Humanity has declared its own doom so many times. It's practically become a seasonal event. In the year 999, people gathered to pray. In 1666, they panicked. In 1844, they climbed hills to wait for Jesus. In 2012, they bought crystals and tweeted, "If we die, we die." And yet, here we are. Still paying rent, still trying to decide how to take our coffee. So why? Why do we keep predicting the end, and then act surprised when it doesn't show up? Maybe the apocalypse was never really about despair. Maybe it's about hope, a story we tell ourselves when we crave change. Every failed doomsday is also a fresh beginning. When a prophecy collapses, people don't give up. They simply say, that wasn't the end. It was a warning. It's a brilliant coping mechanism, really, because if the end can always be postponed, then maybe our problems can too. Let's call it the next time syndrome. Someone predicts the apocalypse. People panic. Nothing happens. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief. And, secretly, misses the excitement. Doom fatigue turns into doom nostalgia, and before long a new theory appears. We're addicted to one of humanity's oldest emotional cycles, the rhythm of panic and relief. Maybe that's why apocalypse stories never truly disappear. They're reminders that everything we take for granted, our cities, our comfort, even our species, is fragile. And that fragility can make life feel precious. So maybe the end of the world isn't something to fear, but something to thank. Because every time it doesn't come, we get one more chance to begin again. The real secret of the end that never comes is that it isn't about death at all. It's about renewal, not apocalypse, but continuity. As long as humanity exists, we'll keep imagining the end, and by doing so, we'll keep rewriting the beginning. The end as a beginning. As we've seen, after all the prophecies, plagues, mushroom clouds, and calendar scares, the world is still turning. Maybe the true story of the apocalypse isn't about how the world ends, but how it always finds a way to keep going. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that every end is usually followed by a sunrise. Empires collapse, cities crumble, civilizations vanish. And then, somewhere, someone starts building again, hopefully with better blueprints this time. Even in the universe's greatest moments of collapse, there are seeds of new creation. Stars die so that new ones can be born. Planets form from cosmic dust. And perhaps, somewhere out there, a curious being is watching our story unfold, wondering if we'll make it past the next final chapter. Maybe the apocalypse isn't a single event at all, but a rhythm. A cosmic inhale and exhale. An endless cycle of endings and beginnings. And somehow, that's comforting, isn't it? Because if everything must end, then every end is also a chance to start again. So the next time someone says, "The world is ending," just smile, take a sip of your coffee and say, "Maybe it is, but let's see what happens after." Thank you for staying awake, or at least mostly awake, through tonight's journey into humanity's favorite fear. If this little adventure left you a bit wiser, a bit calmer, and maybe a bit more hopeful, then don't forget to sleepily like the video and subscribe for more delightful dives into history's strangest dreams. Until next time, remember, every ending is just the beginning of another story. Sweet dreams and good night.